Israeli forces open fire on Palestinians gathering at US-backed aid centers. Egypt puts achieving Gaza's ceasefire in coordination with Qatar and the United States a top priority. And Russia says that efforts to reach a settlement with Ukraine remain highly complex. Gaza's government media has accused Israel of deliberately targeting starving civilians at aid distribution sites, calling it a horrific international repeated crime. According to a statement published on Telegram, Israeli forces have opened fire on Palestinians gathered at US-backed aid centers, killing 27 more people today and bringing the total number of deaths to 102 since May the 27th. Another 490 have been injured in attacks at 8 sites in the Palestinian side of Rafah and along the Nazarene corridor. The office said the 8 centers located in exposed areas under Israeli control have become mass bloodbaths, luring desperate civilians suffering under severe famine and siege conditions. The Israeli occupation military has confirmed that its troops fired near a US-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation (GHF) aid distribution site in Gaza, saying the shots were directed at individuals who approached from unauthorized routes. In a statement posted in English on Telegram, the army said soldiers identified several suspects moving towards them about 500 meters from the aid site. After initial warning shots were ignored, additional fire was directed near a few individual suspects who advanced toward the troops. The military stated that it is aware of reports of casualties and that the incident is currently under review. Spain's defense minister has suspended Israeli missile manufacturing license, effectively cancelling a €285 million contract for 168 Spike LR2 anti-tank systems intended for the Spanish Army and Marine Corps. The decision, confirmed by Defense Ministry sources, is part of Spain's effort to eliminate technological dependence on Israel due to its military actions in Gaza. The contract, awarded in October 2023, is Qnews, the Spanish subsidiary of Israel's Rafael advanced defense systems, included 168 launch units, 1,680 missiles, and full logistical support. Spain is now considering the United States-made FGM-148F Javelin missile as an alternative. Hamas has condemned the Israeli military massacre in the El Alam area on the Palestinian side of Rafah as a deliberate act of genocide against unarmed civilians waiting for food aid. In a statement, Hamas highlighted that targeting the starving during their search for food reveals the nature of the oppressor. Hamas called for immediate action from the United Nations Security Council and international relief organizations to hold this deadly mechanism and open safe humanitarian corridors under international supervision. Egyptian Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli has emphasized that under the auspices of Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, Egypt puts achieving a ceasefire in Gaza in coordination with Qatar and the United States a top priority. During a government meeting, Madbouli stressed the importance of preparing for a reconstruction conference without displacing Palestinians. The Egyptian Prime Minister also praised the organization of the recent Egyptian-American Forum and highlighted efforts to enhance economic relations with Arab and African nations. UNICEF spokesperson Kazim Abu Khalaf has announced that the organization has 1,000 aid trucks ready to enter Gaza, emphasizing that international law requires Israel to facilitate this aid. He also condemned the targeting of Palestinians seeking humanitarian assistance and called for a swift, independent investigation into the violence and at the aid distribution center. Additionally, Palestinian Health Ministry spokesperson Khalil al-Daqran reported over 60 Palestinian deaths and around 600 other injuries near 3 centers due to Israeli fire.
To the right.
UN spokesperson Stephanie Dujarric said the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres expressed his outrage over reports of Palestinians killed and injured while seeking aid in Gaza, calling for an independent investigation. Dujarric said that Guterres condemned the violence and urged for a permanent ceasefire, emphasizing Israel's obligation to allow humanitarian aid into Gaza. Dujarric also highlighted the dire conditions with severe restrictions on aid deliveries, worsening the humanitarian crisis.
People in Gaza must be restored immediately. The United Nations must be allowed to work in safety and security under conditions that fully respects our humanitarian.
The UN Human Rights Office has warned that Israel's actions in Gaza, including blockade, aid and repeated attacks on civilians, could constitute war crimes and other serious violations of international law. Spokesperson Jeremy Lawrence pointed to the killing of civilians at aid distribution sites for a third consecutive day, calling for immediate, impartial investigations. He also criticized Israel's militarized aid delivery system, saying it endangers civilians and breaches international standards. Lawrence also referred to the International Court of Justice 2024 ruling that found a real and imminent risk to Palestinians under the Genocide Convention. From
officials in Gaza already talking about movement.
In 2024, the International Court of Justice found that there were
Israeli occupation forces reportedly opened fire on Palestinians near an aid site, causing casualties amid ongoing humanitarian crises in Gaza.
Israeli occupation forces reportedly opened fire on Palestinians gathered near an aid distribution site on the Palestinian side of Rafah in southern Gaza, killing and injuring multiple people, according to Gaza Civil Defense Agency. The site was run by the US-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which operates independently of the UN to deliver aid amid Israel's ongoing blockade. Eyewitnesses and medics said Israeli forces fired on the crowd seeking food. The Israeli military claimed it was unaware of injuries caused by its fire and said the incident is under review. This attack is part of a series of incidents where Israeli forces have targeted aid seekers. On March 23, 2024, at least 19 Palestinians were killed in an Israeli attack targeting civilians waiting for aid southeast of Gaza City. Similarly, on March 14, 2024, the Israeli occupation forces opened heavy fire on thousands of civilians gathered near the Kuwait roundabout in southern Gaza City, resulting in more than 80 deaths and 200 injuries. The United Nations has accused Israel of deliberately obstructing aid distribution in Gaza, where 2.1 million people face extreme food insecurity. Restrictions on aid access have led to chaos, including looting by desperate civilians. These attacks underscore the urgent need for a ceasefire and unrestricted humanitarian access to prevent further catastrophe in Gaza.
And for more analysis on the situation, we now move on to Salma Marwan in our newsroom. Salma?
Thank you, Rana. And for further analysis on the matter, Ambassador Dr. Mohammed Higazi, the former Assistant Foreign Minister, joins us from Cairo. Dr. Mohammed, pleasure to have you as always. And delving right in, how effective do you think the calls for independent investigations into the violence at aid distribution centers will be?
It is truly a horrific crime when you attack starving people for food. And this is a continuation of the Israeli breaching international humanitarian law, and those crimes has to be registered to be punished in due course. The declaration, I want to start by commenting on the joint declaration of Egypt and Qatar yesterday, which shows that the mediators are exerting, particularly Egypt, its utmost effort to bring a long-term ceasefire. And in dealing with the Witkoff framework agreement, one has to recall that Witkoff has changed his framework to an extent that Hamas found it lacking three fundamental pillars. One is a long-term ceasefire. Second is the assurances from the United States or guarantees. The third is the current situation which we are discussing, the humanitarian protocol, which is definitely one of the worst scenes one can ever recall. And I guess that international community should push further, not only to sanction Israel, which I will comment later, but maybe to call for a no-fly zone, even if it requires a United Nations Security Council resolution, or maybe it will be impeded or refused by an American veto. The international community should show at least that they are against what they are seeing. You cannot just see civilians being bombarded, even civilian humanitarian assistance distribution centers are like a trap for people to be attacked by a mighty army. This is something that the United States should distance itself. It is a complicity against humanitarian law. It's a complicity against human life. And I think we should
Sir, sorry for cutting in, but shedding light on the United Nations specifically, what are the chances of restoring the UN functions so it can be responsible for the delivery of humanitarian aid?
It's an integral part of the Witkoff agreement or Witkoff framework agreement that is discussed. But when he put it on the table, he omitted three pillars. As I said, one is the guarantee, long-term ceasefire, and the humanitarian protocol. The two negotiators or the mediators, Egypt and Qatar, issued yesterday a declaration that shows their will to continue talking to the parties, and particularly to Witkoff. You cannot really mediate and impose. You have to talk to the two parties, take a common ground. This is negotiation the way we do it at universities, the way we have experienced all over our diplomatic career. The attempt of Witkoff to impose an Israeli or one side view on the other will not work. And he ignored, I think, a very important issue, which is the guarantee to a permanent ceasefire. On January, previous agreement, if you may recall, the second phase was a phase of dialogue and negotiation that would lead after the 60 days of truth or ceasefire will lead to a permanent ceasefire. Israel ignored all that and ignored even the broker. The broker was the United States, and President Trump was proud to repeat always that he is the one behind the January agreement. But see what Israel did. She just went back to war. What will happen if there is no guarantee in the Witkoff framework agreement? And what will happen if there is no permanent ceasefire and Israel got half of their prisoners and moved into war again? And how about this humanitarian distribution catastrophe, which ignores also the United Nations and the assistance that UNRWA, for example, could have distributed by 400 locations in Gaza? I think we are witnessing really one of the worst humanitarian pages and one of the catastrophe that need really to be punished. Otherwise, it would repeat itself again.
Yes, sir, your point is clear. That was Ambassador Dr. Mohammed Higazi from Cairo, the former Assistant Foreign Minister. Thank you so much for joining us here on Q News and for all the insights you provided us with. And now we go back to Rana in our studio.
Thank you so much, Salma Marwan. And now moving on to Cairo, where Egypt's Foreign Minister Badr Abdulati has reaffirmed Egypt's support for achieving calm between India and Pakistan, emphasizing the need for stability in South Asia. During a meeting with a high-level Indian parliamentary delegation, he welcomed the recent ceasefire agreement and stressed the importance of resolving disputes through dialogue. Abdulati also expressed concern over terrorism and highlighted Egypt's commitment to combating it, while seeking to enhance bilateral cooperation with India. Moving on to Beirut, where Lebanese President Joseph Aoun and Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi have met in Lebanon to discuss strengthening bilateral relations and regional cooperation. Lebanese President Joseph Aoun said Lebanon wants to strengthen state-to-state relations with Iran and stressed peaceful dialogue to resolve conflicts. He highlighted rebuilding efforts after Israeli war damage. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi reaffirmed Iran's support for Lebanon's sovereignty and independence, denying any interference in its internal affairs. He also backed national dialogue and efforts to end Israeli occupation. Qatar has committed $7 billion to help rebuild Syria through new power plants. However, this initiative will be ineffective unless the Syrian government can prevent armed gangs from stealing power cables faster than they can be repaired. This investment represents Syria's largest foreign funding announcement since the recent lifting of U.S. sanctions by U.S. President Donald Trump, aiming at aiding the country's recovery. The Kremlin has said that efforts to reach a settlement in Ukraine's conflict remain highly complex, with no quick resolution in sight. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov confirmed this agreements on prisoner exchanges and return of fallen soldiers would be upheld. He also noted that while President Putin is open to high-level talks, no concrete plans for meetings with U.S. President Donald Trump or Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky have yet been set. A joint summit involving all three leaders remains unlikely for now. The comments follow peace talks in Turkey, where Russia demanded Ukraine surrender more territory and accept military restrictions, conditions Kyiv has consistently rejected. The Kremlin has said that President Vladimir Putin was kept informed in real time about a series of Ukrainian drone strikes on Russian air bases on June the 1st. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov stated that Russia's investigative team has launched a probe into the incidents and urged the public to await official findings. He also pointed to a statement from the Ministry of Defense addressing the attacks. The attacks reportedly hit multiple sites, including some deep in Siberia, and damaged 41 Russian warplanes, according to Ukrainian officials. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has reported in an online briefing that his team represented a list of nearly 400 children from repatriation during peace talks in Istanbul, but Russia agreed to consider returning only 10. Zelensky also discussed a successful Ukrainian intelligence operation called Spider's Web, which involved drones attacking Russian airfields, thereby boosting allies' confidence in Ukraine's military capabilities.
А також демонструємо не тільки руським агресорам, а всім тим нашим союзникам, які були сильними союзниками.
Despite the ongoing peace talks which is taking place in Istanbul on June the 2nd, Russia and Ukraine have continued to exchange fire along the front lines. The Russian Defense Ministry reported strikes on Ukrainian drone production sites, launch areas and troop deployments, targeting 152 locations within 24 hours. Additionally, Russia's air defense intercepted various Ukrainian missiles and claimed to have destroyed 316 Ukrainian drones, including 205 outside the conflict zone. Ukrainian officials have said that a Russian missile strike on the city center of Sumy killed 3 people and injured at least 16 others, including 4 children. Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha condemned the attack as a deliberate strike on civilians. Video released by Ukraine's emergency services showed debris, damaged cars, bodies at the scene as medics treated the wounded. According to the preliminary reports, Russia launched 5 attacks on Sumy using multiple launched rocket systems. United Nations spokesperson Stephanie Dujarric has emphasized the need for an agreement between Russia and Ukraine, avoiding speculation on Russia's proposal for a binding Security Council resolution. Dujarric condemned the recent attacks that took place and killed over 20 civilians and injured more than 100, highlighting the urgent need for humanitarian aid and worsening conditions in Ukraine. His comments came after Ukrainian and Russian delegations met at Istanbul's palace on June the 2nd for peace talks, accompanied by senior Turkish officials. And moving on, NATO defense ministers will meet in Brussels on June the 5th to discuss increased military investments and rising security demands. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte has proposed raising defense spending to 3.5% of GDP plus 1.5% for broader security totaling 5%, responding to US President Donald Trump's call for higher commitments. The plan will be finalized at a NATO summit in The Hague on June 24 and 25. Currently, 22 of 32 members meet the 12% target, but none reach the proposed 5%. The United States spends 3.2%, while Poland leads at least over 4%. And that brings us to the end of our news bulletin. Here's what we have been covering. Israeli forces open fire on Palestinians gathering at the United States' 'backed aid centers. Egypt puts achieving Gaza ceasefire in coordination with Qatar, the US and the United States a top priority. And Russia says that efforts to reach a settlement with Ukraine remain highly complex. This concludes our news bulletin for the hour. Don't forget to follow Qnews on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram and TikTok at QNewsEG to stay informed. Thank you very much for watching and stay tuned for more updates on Qnews.